Hello everyone, this is part 25 of What If Naruto Was Reborn as a Shinigami, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. 5 years passed like they were nothing. Things in Konoha settled down again and life became normal for all the inhabitants of the village. It was an age of prosperity for all. It was a time of peace. Especially for two special people. Naruto and Tenten had spent the years loving one another and loving life. Never knowing when Itachi would come had made them greet each morning as if it would be their last. They lived their lives to the fullest and tried to spread their joy to others. The Angels of Konoha, as they came to be known, never left the village after that day. They spent their time playing with children and teaching them things. They were beloved by all but the most stubborn of Konoha citizens. Every morning they would wake and go through their paces. Training for that eventual day when he would come back. Tenten would put Naruto through a hellish regime, trying anything she could to keep him on his toes. Keppuku would drain him down to almost nothing and then he would have to keep fighting, always avoiding her sly sharpness. They practiced fighting while avoiding looking at an opponent's eyes and hands. Since Itachi had snared Naruto one time in the past when he had looked at his finger. So, he concentrated on looking at the feet and only the feet. It was hard at first, but eventually he got the hang of it. Itachi would not get him on that account, unless he had come up with new tricks. And Naruto was sure he had. His own bag of tricks had grown a bit. His efficiency with his hammer was as high as it ever would be. His chain was an extension on its own, not requiring any thought anymore. It moved of its own volition, his subconscious thought providing its movement. Those skills did not need sharpening. His skills in the ninja arts, however, did. He and Tenten spent many hours with Jiraiya and Kakashi and Guy and any sensei who would teach them. They learned many things. Jutsu, correct posture for taijutsu, genjutsu for Tenten, how to dispel them for Naruto, and medical jutsu as well. 5 years of learning. 5 years of living unharassed. The highlight of the two's day, once all the training and studying was done, was playing in the park with the children. The saddest day they had was after the first year of trying to have a child. They learned that Tenten was unable, and so was Naruto. Dreams of a family SD then and there, and they had filled that void with the village children. They never adopted, since they never knew if they would live through tomorrow, but they were a fixture at the orphanage. Currently they sat on a bench at the park, surrounded by a horde of children of all shapes and sizes, eye and hair colors, skin tone and gender. The two angels smiled at the happy tykes and ruffled their wings, gaining giggles from their small menagerie. Tell us a story. Tell us a story. Naruto chuckled and leaned against the back of the bench, his right arm going around behind Tenten, brushing against her wing. She shuddered and suppressed a sigh. It had been a while since they'd had any alone time, and any little, gentle touch was like a lightning bolt up her spine. Naruto noticed it, but pretended not to as he addressed the children. All right then. Which one of us do you want to tell a story? Tenten-san. He brushed his hand against her wing again, watching with a smirk as she shuddered and glared at him, before she smiled at the children. How would you all like to hear a story about my old teammate Lee and Guy Sensei? A cheer went up from the kids at the mention of the two eccentric shinobi. They might have never seen the two green-clad ninja, but their exploits were well known around the park and orphanage. Good thing the children had never seen the two in person. Well, this one time Guy Sensei and Lee. It had been years since he had last seen anyone that he knew. Years since he had spoken a word to anyone. Years since he had walked this path. Years since he had cared his brother. Years since his new eyes had taken hold. Years since he had seen the only person anchoring him to this world. He walked the path back to Konoha, the path that would lead him to his salvation, or his damnation, he didn't care either way. What awaited him at the end of this walk was Uzumaki Naruto. He could see them now, the gates, those huge, wooden gates that heralded his arrival at his destiny, the fight he longed for, the end of the road. He stopped for a moment to catch his breath. The excitement was getting to him. Anxiety was welling up in his chest, and if he wasn't careful it would overwhelm him. He couldn't afford to be overly excited, no matter how exciting the proposition was. The gravel on the road crunched under his sandals, the only sound betraying his existence. He knew that as soon as he was seen it might incite a riot. Good. He wanted to be seen. After 5 years of hiding himself and training to exhaustion, he finally felt ready. He could only hope that Naruto had been training as well. The sunlight filtered through the leaves that lined the path, illuminating the figure as he stepped out of the shadows. He was dressed as he was all those years ago, his clothes still tattered and torn, but the Uchiha crest was displayed proudly upon his back. He still maintained some of his Akatsuki identity. The gray leggings were still upon his legs and his ring still adorned his finger. These were parts of his past that were just as important as the Uchiha crest or his slashed Konoha headband. He couldn't let them go. They defined him. His was a past that was shrouded in misery, contempt, betrayal, and death. He sighed as he approached the gates, knowing that the mere sight of him would throw the village into turmoil. The Chunin who saw him didn't recognize him right away and simply blinked. Name and reason for visiting. Uchiha Itachi. I'm here for Naruto. Tell him I await his arrival. The time has come. The Chunin's eyes widened and he dropped the clipboard he'd been holding, stumbling backwards before sprinting into the village. Itachi sighed and scooped the clipboard up, thumbing through the log. He turned to find someone else approaching the gates and sat on top of the hut's counter. Taking up a pen, he addressed the man coolly. Name and reason for visiting. X. And that's why you should never give Lee alcohol. The kids all stared wide-eyed at the recount of one of Lee's drunken rampages, all silently swearing to be on the lookout for such a dangerous lunatic. Tenten giggled at the gaping and stood from the bench, stretching her arms and letting her wings flare out behind her. AM escaped her lips as her back cracked and her feathers ruffled slightly. She cracked her eyes open and stared at the children again before shooing them away with a smile. After all, lunch wasn't going to buy itself. Naruto stood as well, working the kinks out of his en and back, as he watched the kids walk away. It was always sad watching them go, knowing that he and Tenten would never know the joy of coming home to children of their own. Tenten heard him sigh and wrapped her arms around his waist. It's not good to dwell on things that can't be done, Naruto. He smiled down at her and put his arm around her shoulder, their wings touching. I know, but I had always hoped that we could leave a legacy behind in Konoha. We've been so blessed, I just always hoped that we could, you know, be parents. Tenten began to lead him away from the park toward the restaurant district. Perhaps a trip to Ichiraku's would get him out of his funk. Sometimes he dwelled on what could have been entirely too much, not that she hadn't wanted children as well. A little girl and boy to teach and love, and share her love of pointy things. As they walked, they both nodded absently to people as they passed by. Naruto still wasn't used to being revered, even after 5 years, and he still fidgeted when an adult villager got too close. Children didn't bother him, but he would always be wary of adults. They finally made it to Ichiraku's and ordered the usual. Ayami chatted with them a bit and then left to help her father make the ramen. Chuki might have been getting on in years, but he still was able to cook. Tenten quirked an eyebrow in his direction when Naruto shivered suddenly and looked around. What's the matter? He gave her a grave look and shook himself to rid himself of the goosebumps that had formed. Just a bad feeling. Like something from our past is coming back. She took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. It was too blue and beautiful for it to be a bad day. Sunad had been enjoying a nice little nap. She had been trying to sleep off a little sake consumption. She had been aware that her shirt was dangerously close to slipping open and that Jiraiya was perched on the couch not far away from her, scribbling in his notebook. She didn't care about Jiraiya being there. He was just keeping watch over her, and it wasn't like he hadn't seen her girls uninhibited by her shirt in recent years. Some old habits just hard. She nuzzled her face into a stack of papers and was just at that point where the real world didn't matter anymore, when her door slammed open and a frantic Chunin ran in. Hokage-sama. Urgent news. Sunad sighed and slowly raised her head off the desk, mindful of her shirt, and crossed her arms over her still considerably ample chest as she glared at the Chunin. This had better be something about the sky falling or someone needing their head pulled out of their ass. The Chunin straightened up and saluted. Hi, Hokage-sama. Uchiha Itachi has returned and he demands Uzumaki Naruto at the gate. Tsunade flew to her feet immediately, Jiraiya leaping to his feet along with her. Where is he? Naruto or Itachi? Either one. Left Itachi at the gate, and I don't know where Naruto is. Tsunade grit her teeth and glared at the poor man, who cowered under her burning gaze. You idiot. Why in the hell did you leave a dangerous criminal alone at the gates? I panicked. I've never been up against someone as powerful as him. Tsunade took a deep breath to calm herself. We'll talk about your conduct later. For now, we find Naruto. Jiraiya. I'm on my way. The old toad sage disappeared immediately and Tsunade took her jacket from its hook, throwing it on. She cast another glare at the Chunin and opened the door. You're coming with me. We're going to see Itachi. We have a stop to make on the way though. The Chunin nodded his head vigorously and fell in behind her. Hi, Hokage-sama. Naruto leaned back on the stool and groaned, letting the ramen settle down and begin to digest. Tenten smirked and slapped his gut hard, making a loud popping noise. Naruto grunted and gave her a playful glare. What was that for? You're getting fat. Starting tomorrow, we're eating at other restaurants for lunch. Naruto stuck his bottom lip out and crossed his arms. I am not fat, and I'll have you know that even if I was, I could still take you out. I said you were getting fat, not that you were. And eating ramen every day isn't good for you. You need to eat other things, and so do I. I don't wanna. Asai from behind the counter brought their attention to Ayami, who was watching them with her chin held in her hands, a wistful smile on her face. You two make such a cute couple. I wish I could find someone. Tenten snickered and smacked Naruto's belly again. Well, when you do find someone, don't pick someone who eats all the time. This one'll catch up to Chuji pretty soon if he keeps it up. Before Naruto could retort, Jiraiya landed outside the stand and latched onto the blonde's arm. Come on, brat, we gotta go. Naruto pulled back against the older man and jerked his arm away. Hold up a second. What's the rush? Itachi's back and he wants you. He's at the gate. Naruto stood up quickly, knocking his stool over and ducked under the flaps. Jiraiya watched as the blonde bent low and leapt into the sky, his wings spreading as he took flight and rushed for the gate, the older man following along underneath him on the ground. Tenten sat stunned for a moment on her stool before stepping outside and launching herself into the air. Unbidden tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she followed behind Naruto. After all these years, she had hoped that Itachi had simply disappeared, but now he had shown up from nowhere. Her eyes turned to the sky again and she took a deep breath. Today was so perfect. Itachi wrote down the name of another merchant that came to the gate and bade him good day. It had been a long time since he had simply sat down and enjoyed himself in a manner like this. Civilians were so unmindful of details like his slashed high-tie 8, his ragged appearance, or the Uchiha crest on his back. He could K them so easily. He felt the presence of a familiar person behind him, off to one side, but decided to simply play the role. Keeping things cool at the moment was important. He didn't want to start a riot, yet. Name and reason for leaving. I see you've inundated yourself quite nicely into Konoha society, Itachi-san. It's been almost 2 decades since you had Chunin duties, hasn't it? Itachi calmly sat the clipboard down and turned his head. Indeed. After years of nothing but life-threatening tasks, I find mundane and simple things relaxing. I have to say that it was nice of you to let me do this, Hokage-sama. Tsunade put her hands on her hips, watching carefully as Itachi got off the counter and turned to face her. She quirked an eyebrow at his disheveled state and he looked down, following her eyes. My state of dress. Admittedly, I have not taken very good care of my clothing. Or your hair. It's really long now. Appearances are inconsequential. Where is he? Tsunade grimaced, hoping that subject wouldn't be broached already. Jiraiya has gone to fetch him. We haven't forgotten the bargain between you two. I see. They remained silent for a moment, a breeze blowing along the ground, sweeping up the dirt and swirling it around. Tsunade snapped her fingers and reached into her jacket pocket. Here, I retrieved this for you. I thought you might like to have it, seeing as this will be your last day alive. Itachi calmly took the bundle with a small smile. And how do you know I'm going to be the one S? Either way, you'll S today. By Naruto's hand or my own. Your deeds against Konoha are entirely too many. You've brought this on yourself. Itachi nodded his head and unwrapped the bundle, a tiny gasp escaping his lips. He reverently held it up to the light, spinning it this way and that, watching as the light reflected off its gold surface. With a shuddering sigh, he nodded his head to Tsunade. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me. She nodded minutely, looking at the simple gold band. It was his mother Mikoto's wedding ring. One of the only things that she had been able to salvage after the Uchiha lands and properties were auctioned off. It hadn't seemed right to sell that simple little ring, and she was glad now that she hadn't. Even someone like Itachi deserved a moment of peace in life. She watched as he took off his lace and slipped the ring onto it before retying it and tucking it back inside his shirt. Tsunade observed the small blob of red at the corner of his right eye with interest, the medic in her intrigued. Do they bleed when you're sad? Itachi nodded and suddenly his head shot up to the sky. Tsunade closed her eyes and said a silent prayer, knowing that this might be the end of one of her favorite people. Naruto landed beside her no less than a second later, and Jiraiya stopped beside her as well. A few seconds later Tenten landed and stood beside Naruto, latching onto his arm protectively. Itachi ignored the rest, his eyes solely on Naruto. It's good to see you again, Naruto-kun. I trust you've been well. Naruto frowned at Itachi. I was doing good until you showed up. My life these past 5 years has been wonderful. Then you have no regrets. Only that you choose to continue this. Itachi nodded and closed his eyes slowly. When he opened them, he had a new Sharingan spinning, one that had an infinity sign spinning in the midst of the red iris. Then I have no regrets as well. Itachi's sword was out in a heartbeat and thrusting for his chest. Naruto's hammer appeared out of thin air and blocked the blow, knocking it aside, while his chain tried to impale Itachi. The Uchiha leapt back outside the gates of Konoha, his stance guarded. Naruto spun on his heel, pulled Tenten in close, and gave her a deep, passionate kiss that left her reeling. I love you, Ten-chan. Before she could respond, the sound of clangs rang out again and all the Konoha ninja leapt onto the wall. This would be a battle none wanted to miss. Itachi calmed himself as he watched Naruto come for him. This was finally it, the time when his capacity would be measured to its fullest. He threw up his guard when the hammer crashed into him and marveled at how hard the boy could hit. It was like being slammed by an elephant's weight. Itachi grit his teeth as he was pushed back, his feet leaving furrows in the ground. Thinking quickly, he threw his weight to one side, letting the sword drag around the body of the hammer and slicing into Naruto's left arm. The blonde stumbled when the resistance left and held onto his arm as Itachi picked himself up, the wound already healing. It seems I have drawn first blood, Naruto-kun. So it would seem. Naruto's chain rushed across the ground and rose up like a cobra, the end striking at Itachi over and over. He blocked every blow with practiced ease, trying the whole while to keep his eye on Naruto as well. The sound of air being displaced caught his attention and he leapt straight into the air, avoiding the hammer once again. Naruto watched Itachi as he came plummeting down and charged up a Rasengan, thrusting it into Itachi's chest. His eyes went wide when Itachi exploded, blowing away a good bit of the surrounding trees and vegetation. Atop the wall, Tenten bit her nails nervously, wondering what had happened to Naruto. Her unasked question was answered moments later when both Itachi and Naruto emerged from opposite sides of the forest. The chain dragged the hammer back to Naruto and he twirled it in his GS. Itachi unsheathed his sword again, looking at the crater where the two clones had been. I see you've improved vastly with your Kage Bunshin. I didn't see you make the switch. Naruto grunted and reached in his pouch for some shuriken. I didn't see you make a swap either. Are we through warming up now? I should say so, yes. My muscles should be loosened now. Good. The two stood motionless for a moment before running forward again, steel clashing against steel. Up on the wall, Tsunade frowned. This was not what she had been expecting. It's like they're playing with one another. Why don't they actually fight? Jiraiya sighed and folded his arms. They're feeling each other out. Make no mistake though, they've been fighting to K the entire time. Then how did Itachi manage to draw blood and Naruto didn't? Itachi never truly drew blood. That was a clone. They've been standing back observing each other since the beginning. Tsunade quirked her eyebrow and frowned. And you know all this how? Jiraiya grinned and looked back out at the battleground. I'm Naruto's teacher and I've fought Itachi before. Believe me, they're serious, but cautious. Itachi wants it to last as long as possible. Itachi blocked one last blow from the hammer and leapt back again, putting distance between himself and Naruto. He sheathed his sword and let his arms dangle at his sides. Have your skills improved any beyond that of hand-to-hand combat? Have you become more adept at the art of ninjutsu? Naruto still held his hammer at his side, his chain swishing back and forth before him. He refused to relinquish his weapon. I'm adequate. I believe you'll like the challenge. The two eyed each other again for a moment before Naruto spoke. Why do you keep stopping and talking, Itachi? Were you lonely these 5 years? Itachi sighed and raised his hand slowly. Lonely? Of course. I've been lonely since the night I left Konoha. I'd just like to chat with an equal in between blows. You can grant me that right. You're ruining my concentration. Itachi smirked. You've never concentrated a day in your life, and that will be your undoing. Naruto watched as the man burst into a cloud of crows and he was left alone in the clearing. He looked around without moving, trying to guess where Itachi would be. This is where his training with Kurenai and Ino would come in handy. He couldn't allow himself to be manipulated, but he also didn't want to let Itachi know he was onto his game. His eyes widened a minute bit when Sasuke walked out of the forest and strode up to him. Loser. Idiot. Wimp. Dobe. You let Itachi K me. Naruto kept his eyes forward, letting his chain watch out for attacks from Itachi. I didn't let you You ked yourself when you abandoned all of us. Sasuke smirked, that annoying smirk that always irked Naruto. Then why are you speaking to man? Because the man who's alive won't show himself, preferring to hide behind illusions. Sasuke wavered and dissipated into the wind and Itachi appeared again. I thought that would have unsettled you. Your brother and I weren't exactly on good terms, ever. Itachi nodded his head in understanding. It was a poor attempt on my part. However, future attempts will be done with more fervor. Naruto cursed when the chain blocked an Itachi's sword from behind while 3 others rushed him from the front, making hand signs at an advanced speed. Guayu no Jutsu. Thinking quickly, Naruto slammed his hammer as hard as he could into the ground, throwing up a shower of dirt and flinging himself to the ground. The flames impacted with the dirt wall and exploded into a white-hot ball of fire. The chain plunged through the forehead of the Itachi with the sword and Naruto sped away from the crater he'd made. A quick look around found Itachi holding his forehead. My Kage Bunshin did not appreciate that blow. Very well then. Let's see how your ninjutsu truly is. Naruto let his chain take hold of the hammer since he'd need his hands free for this. Itachi flashed through hand seals again and Naruto waited to see what he'd do. Fire was Itachi's element, so his wind jutsu were out. Another fireball crashed toward him and his chain threw the hammer at the center of the flame. Itachi barely dodged as the hammer flew by him and took out a few dozen of the trees. He was sent back on the defensive as Naruto came at him with a Rasengan in both hands, a result of training non-stop with Jiraiya and Kakashi. Itachi shunshined away just as Naruto came crashing down, blowing away more of the forest. He stopped a good bit away, observing the damage they'd already caused. Several craters and nearly a quarter-acre of forest demolished, not bad. He shot back toward Naruto as the young man began to stand. Naruto stood up slowly and felt a phantom pain shoot through his chest. Looking down, he saw Itachi's blade sticking out of his chest. He took a deep breath and jerked backward, surprising Itachi and wrapping his arm around Itachi's head before pitching forward, slamming Itachi on the ground and pinning him with his wings as he slid the sword out of his chest, the wound healing immediately. Naruto puffed for a bit before putting the sword to Itachi's teeth, drawing a bit of blood. You're not the real Itachi. He thrust the sword downward and the Kage Bunshin disappeared, a hole in its teeth. Naruto frowned as the sword disappeared too and turned around. He was through playing around. His wings flared behind him and he leapt into the air, leaving the hammer and chain on the ground. He hovered above the ground several feet in the air and his wings began to beat harder and harder. He'd gotten the idea after speaking to Temari a few times. Most Futen Jutsu needed a conduit, something to guide the wind. He didn't have a fan. But he did have some big-ass wings. Itachi, hiding in the trees, watched as Naruto began to beat his wings, the air rippling around them. He had seen this type of thing with wind uses in Suna. Kamikaze Gufu. Itachi ran quickly to escape the huge vortex of wind that tore through the forest, throwing trees here and there and everywhere. It was unsettling that Naruto had come that far. With his own natural conduit for his element, he was a force to be reckoned with. He now sat in a treetop nearly a mile away, looking back at the cloud of dust that had arisen and the form of Naruto flapping in the air, looking for him. If he was careful, he could sneak up and get him. He'd have to be extremely cautious, or he could throw caution to the wind. He took a calming breath and leaped out of the tree, running back to the clearing. Naruto landed in the middle of the toppled forest, looking all around as his chain shirred back to him and handed back his hammer. He knew that Itachi wasn't here. There was no way that the man would have been done in by that. Not with Amaterasu at his disposal. Shuriken burst from the forest and suddenly multiplied into thousands, spinning through Naruto's clothing and the feathers on his wings. A platoon of Itachis engulfed him, and Naruto struggled to stay on his feet. He waited for the men to get close and grinned. Kaboom! A violent explosion sped through the area and the clones dispersed in a pillar of smoke. Itachi's lips curled up slightly as he and Naruto appeared on opposite sides of the smoke column. I see you learned one of my favorite jutsu. I don't think that jutsu are going to get us anywhere against each other though. Perhaps we should go back to kenjutsu and taijutsu. I'll do whatever is necessary to survive. I don't want to S against you, Itachi. I didn't want this in the first place. I know, but it is what I needed. I need to know how far I can go. And you will help me to do it. He closed his eyes and when he opened them, the Mangekyo was spinning. Itachi breathed heavily and the infinity sign began to spin faster and faster. The black flames of Amaterasu rushed from him and made a huge ring around him and Naruto. The blonde spun round and round, looking for an escape and was about to leap when Itachi strode forward, his eyes bleeding, and drew his sword. Don't try to fly. I'll burn you if you do. Only one of us will leave this place alive, or both of us shall fall. Naruto nodded grimly and twirled his hammer. This was it. He'd have to pull out all the punches, and probably use it, even though he knew what would happen. Taking a deep breath, he rushed for the Uchiha and sparks flew again. Tenten watched with horror, as the black flames rose and encircled the two and she began to tear up. She closed her eyes, not daring to look, and clasped her hands together in prayer, praying with all her might that Naruto would make it out of this. She never saw Kami and Sanosuke appear on either side of her, watching the fight with great interest. Tenten felt a hand comb through her hair soothingly and looked up to find Kami staring at her kindly. Don't worry. He'll be fine. I guarantee it. Parry, thrust, roll to the side, sweep kick, parry, swing and a miss, roll backward, leap forward, slam down. This was Naruto's attack in less than 4 seconds. Itachi's grin only grew wider as the battle went on, every blow blocked and blow landed reaffirming his decision that Naruto was his chosen opponent. Naruto felt a cut form on his cheek and growled under his breath, jerking forward under Itachi's guard and knocking the man back with a hammer strike to the gut. Itachi stumbled back and stopped on one knee, the air knocked out of him and one rib broken. He envied Naruto for his regeneration and struggled back to his feet. Naruto rushed forward again and slammed the hammer down, narrowly missing as Itachi rolled aside. For a few seconds, they played a game of whack-a-mole, with Naruto barely missing Itachi each time. Itachi lashed out with a kick to Naruto's chest, sending him reeling backward, and flipped to his feet. Naruto slammed his hammer down to stop his backward momentum and suddenly realized that his chain was nowhere to be found. He could have used it at that moment. He didn't have many options at this point. Itachi was better than him with kenjutsu and was much better at dodging, as were most genjutsu users. Naruto could hit like a sledgehammer, but if it didn't connect, it was worthless. He banked on getting Itachi down again and calculated his action. He'd need all his cunning for this to work. Itachi rushed forward again and began thrusting at Naruto faster and faster, the blonde having trouble blocking with his Seabursum weapon. Finally, Naruto got a break when Itachi overextended on a thrust and grabbed the Uchiha's arm, holding him in place. Naruto seed back his right fist and plowed it into Itachi's face, letting go as he did. Itachi stumbled back and was suddenly stopped. He looked to both sides and his eyes widened. For Naruto's held his arms and legs out to the side, his fingers held tightly so he could not make signs. He watched as Naruto held his right arm overhead, his left hand holding it tightly. A Rasengan formed in his hand and began to spin rapidly, appendages forming from it, giving it the look of a shuriken. Itachi gasped when he realized it was the man's vaunted Rasen Shuriken. He had to do something. Thinking quickly, he directed the Amaterasu to converge on Naruto. Naruto rushed forward, unmindful of the darkness creeping in on him. His only thought was to get to Itachi and land the hit that would end the battle. Halfway to the Uchiha, his hand began to burn with an intense pain and he realized that the Amaterasu was being sucked into the vortex. With only a few feet left, he grit his teeth and continued on. Itachi watched, stunned, as Naruto ignored the pain and continued toward him. The man's feathers were beginning to burn away, his hand now a blackened char, but he refused to relinquish his hold on the jutsu. The cage buncheons were starting to falter, but held on as long as possible. When Naruto was 4 feet from him, Itachi closed his eyes and awaited the inevitable. Naruto had never felt pain like this. His whole body felt like it was on fire and in actuality, he was. He screamed as he thrust the Rasen Shuriken home and into Itachi's gut. And the world exploded. The observers on the wall watched as the flames began to suck inwards and formed a dome around the two. Tenten screamed out Naruto's name and as soon as the dome dissipated, she was gone, flying to his side. Kami and Sanosuke were right behind her and the Konoha ninjas followed. The last black flame of Amaterasu disappeared after scorching the ground and Tenten's hand flew to her mouth as she observed the dismal battleground. The earth was scorched and would probably never grow anything ever again. She gingerly stepped through the ashes until she saw two lumps right next to each other. One was face up, the other face down. She rushed to the lump with wings and started to turn him over. Don't touch him. She turned to Tsunade and her eyes asked, why? Let me look at him first. He might still be alive. Let me see him. Tenten nodded but refused to leave his side. Tsunade's hand glowed green and she ran it over the boy's body. Tears sprang to her eyes and she let the glow s. He's gone. Tenten began to sniffle and those sniffles quickly turned into huge sobs as Tsunade wrapped her arms around the girl. Jiraiya sat staring at his student with eyes, not believing what he was seeing. Tenten felt that soothing hand on her head again and looked up into the eyes of Kami. She and Sanosuke stood side by side, her head shaking. Oh, pish posh. Tell them all to stand back. Tenten wiped her eyes and told everyone to stand back. They obeyed and Kami, unseen by mortal eyes, kneeled down beside Naruto and whispered into his ear, her words lost to the world. Sanosuke put his hand on Tenten's shoulder and gave her a smile. Don't worry. Kami-sama will not let one of her favorites just fade. Naruto has a role to fulfill. I thought he'd already fulfilled his role. Sanosuke shook his head and grinned. His purpose here is fulfilled. But you two have other tasks outside this mortal coil. And do you really think a little immortal flame will stop someone like Naruto? Kami leant up from whispering in Naruto's ear and stood beside Sanosuke again. She patted Tenten on the shoulder and turned to watch Naruto again. 1 minute went by, 2 minutes, and Kami's eyebrow twitched. Uzumaki Naruto, you get your lazy ass up. Tenten began to cry happily as a groan came from the blackened blonde and his wings fluttered. Okay, I'm up. You don't have to yell, Kami-sama. Tenten crushed him in a hug and he cried out in pain, his skin still charred from the Amaterasu. She lowered him back to the ground gently and he whimpered, before opening his blue eyes and glaring at Kami. You couldn't have done anything about this. Tsunade and the rest looked from Naruto to Tenten, their heads swinging. Who are you two talking to? Naruto groaned and laid his head back. Kami-sama. I'm talking to Kami-sama. Yosh. Naruto-kun. Do not go gently into that good night. Tenten giggled at Lee's outburst and brushed Naruto's burnt hair out of his face, some of the follicles flaking away. It would be a hard recovery for the blonde. A shaky cough was heard from behind her. That was a most interesting counter to my Amaterasu, Naruto-kun. Tenten turned fearfully to look behind her and found the red eyes of the Mangekyou staring at her. We both still live. This fight is not over. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.